Dirty Moderates, it's my good, great, wonderful pleasure to welcome Stuart Stevens back to the podcast. Stuart joined us back in the fall of 2022. I consider him a friend of the show because I consider Lincoln Project, of which he is a senior advisor, kind of a soldier in arms with our fight here for democracy, which we do. Stuart, welcome to the program.
Thanks for asking me to the party, man.
Appreciate of course. It. Yeah. Well, thank you for breaking down what happened to your former party. Speaking of parties, Stuart's latest book, and he's written many books, but his latest book, folks, The Conspiracy to End America. I think I have to say, because I love political biographies and election books, this is going to be the essential read of 2024 as this country gets ready to battle Trumpism again. And we have another or a rematch, I should say, not another, but a rematch with Trump and Biden. And Stuart, just to dive into it, the quote, there's a quote on page 144 that just shook me and I thought was so brilliant. I had never read it before. I never heard it before. And it is, I have it here. Let's pull it up so I get it exactly. It is a quote that is Ernest Hemingway's Path to Bankruptcy. And here's what it says. I want everybody to hear this. America's slide into autocracy is most likely to follow Hemingway's description of the path to bankruptcy, gradually and then suddenly. Let's start there. Let's break that down. I think it's sort of both shocking and shattering at the same time.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about looking at how democracies fall into autocracy is that it's not an obscure subject, and there's brilliant people that have written brilliant works on this.
Yeah.
And there's really a lot to read out there and a lot of case studies. And it was those similarities of those case studies that really led me to write this book. When I thought we were seeing this here in America. But, nobody out there who is on the autocratic side comes out and says, I think we should end democracy, guys. Let's go for an autocracy. But there is this common tool of using the benefits and freedoms of democracy to end democracy. So you use freedom of press to end freedom of press. Mm-hmm. You use the ballot box in free elections to end free elections. And I think that you see this in a lot of ways happening now in America. We have, for a lot of reasons, an increasing trend toward minority rule.
Yeah.
Part of that is the way our Constitution is set up and the way demographics have trended in the country. Constitution still gives 2 senators to every state, and yet larger states like your state, California, increasingly grow in comparison to the smaller states. Mm-hmm. So you get this greater disparate size between the 2 states. And it results in implications and ramifications that trickle through our entire system. I mean, most notably the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. So in the history of America, there are 5 justices that have been confirmed by senators who represent a minority of the country.
Right. Yep.
All 5 are on the court today.
Mm-hmm. It's worth noting on that point, if I may interject, that the Republicans have lost the popular vote, right, in presidential elections since 1992, all but once, 2004, when Bush was reelected. To your point, I mean,
I worked on that 2004 campaign, and right. I can tell you, we thought we were very lucky to win. And we never, say what you will about Bush world. I don't think we were ever arrogant.
No.
In fact, I mean, in 2000 when we lost the popular vote, and ended up winning via the Supreme Court, via the Electoral College. We had this kind of dark joke that at the time seemed somewhat funny, that anybody can get elected president when they get more votes. It takes professionals when you lose by 500,000.
Right.
It doesn't seem so funny anymore.
No. Well, but important note, because you did work. It's important, you know. By the way, folks, I think people know you so well, but if not only Stuart Lincoln Project maven, but he of course ran Mitt Romney's campaign in 2012, and also had huge influence and worked on many Republican campaign and many Republican candidate. And also, I want to say, to the point of the 2000 election, Al Gore conceded the election, which Donald Trump still has.
Listen, brother, I wrote a piece about this, but I don't think we talk enough about how much the country owes Al Gore.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And in that moment, he really had the plate set to tear this country apart.
Yeah.
And he really had a legitimate platform, reason to stand there and attack the Supreme Court, attack the whole process.
Right.
And it would have shattered this country.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to know these Gore people. And one of the fascinating points they make is that as soon as the decision came down, Vice President Gore told his staff, don't trust the Supreme Court. That's more important than this election. Mm-hmm. Which, you know, I've won elections, I've lost elections. Losing an election like that, and can't lose a closer election. I mean,
right. 537 votes in Florida.
And the Supreme Court. And the anger and bitterness and exhaustion that you have that would push you to saying something intemperate is really extraordinary that he was able to put what he saw correctly as the interest of the country above that. Mm-hmm. And it was really a heroic moment.
I mean, you could argue that Dick Nixon did the same in 60. I mean, there are credible theories of election malfeasance on the part of the Kennedy people in Cook County.
You know, one of the
Nixon
things
went ahead and did it. I read recently, actually, sorry to interrupt you. I read recently that there was a discussion about fighting that, you know, and Nixon said, no, we got to move forward.
You know, I talk about this in the book. I think it's an interesting case in point. So what would have happened if John Kerry had refused to concede the 2004 election? Mm-hmm. So how would the Democratic Party have responded? They would have told him he was out of his mind. Mm-hmm. And they would have said it publicly, and they would have said publicly, this is a mistake. And privately, they would have been screaming at him like, you know, you're ruining your legacy. You're destroying the party. This is terrible for the country. What would the major media outlets who had supported him editorially, what would they have said? They would have taken his head off. Mm-hmm. The New York Times, Washington Post. Right. So compare that to what happened when Trump did the same with much less justification. Oh, yeah. You know, he lost by 7.5 million, north of 300 electoral votes. You know, with Kerry, if less than a full stadium in an Ohio State game had changed their votes, he would have been president.
Right.
So, you know, what happened there? Well, you know, the party we know, most part went along with Trump. Mm-hmm. And the major right-wing outlets and minor right-wing, as we've seen in the Dominion lawsuit, they didn't believe it. They knew he lost, but they still supported him. Which goes to this point that I make, you know, that Fox News didn't create the Republican Party. Fox News followed the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. You know, think about it. Fox didn't want McCain to win the primary, but they supported him. They sure didn't want Romney to win the primary. Believe me, I'll tell you.
I bet that's true.
They went along with it, and had Jeb Bush won the nomination, they would have gone along with Jeb. Mm-hmm. You know, they were following the party, and I thought what was fascinating about those Dominion Discovery emails and messages is they were panicked that they were losing votes, losing audience share to Newsmax, that they weren't being extreme enough on this. Mm-hmm. So, you know, what really breaks my heart about this is that this generation of Republicans, they're heirs to the greatest generation. Mm-hmm. And all they had to do was get their comm shop to put out a statement congratulating the president-elect of the United States.
That's it.
So, you know, in the history of fighting for democracy, you know, I mean, like my dad, 3 years fighting in the South Pacific, 28 island landings, comes back home, never talks about it, like hundreds of thousands of others. Getting a comm shop to put out a statement like that's not really a brutal, brutal, step you have to take there. It doesn't take a lot of courage. It doesn't take, what is going to happen.
You wrote in the book about how on election night, as you were horrified watching the results came in. Sorry, yes, you were watching the results come in, but you had been receiving text messages leading up to that of people saying, "Hey, thanks for speaking out against Trump. He's so awful."
In 16.
In 16. Yeah. And then as the results came in, please delete the messages. Well, it reminds me of what I heard Liz Cheney say at the in Austin last year at one of these events, the small events I was at, where she said, "Look, stop saying I'm a hero for speaking out." Everybody whispering, everybody hugging her in the corridor. Same thing with Adam Kinzinger. Speak out. Stop telling me I'm great. You need to speak out. After a while, she would get kind of irate. She said at them, "I don't want to hear this anymore." Initially she said, "Oh, thank you, I'm doing the right." And then she went, "Wait a second, why aren't you doing the right thing?" People thanking you profusely for speaking out against an autocratic leader, and yet you're not doing it, but you're thanking me. I mean, it's a little bit like what you experienced. People started to fall in line. But Republicans fall in line, as they used to say, right? Democrats fall in love.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
In 2000, I worked on a Bush campaign. I got to know Liz because I did debate prep for her dad with Liz.
Right.
And Liz ran that.
Yep.
And I wrote a book about it called The Big Enchilada. And I predicted in that book, which came out 2 days before 9/11, that Liz would run for president one day.
Oh,
sort of jokingly, but not really. I mean, she was that impressive.
Yeah, she is.
So there's absolutely nothing about what Liz Cheney is doing now that surprises me. I mean, that's just who she is.
And look, think about it in a non-Orwellian Twilight Zone world, she would be a wonderful Republican.
Yeah, I mean, if there's not room for a Cheney in the Republican Party,
I know you're right. That
I mean, we're like lost our minds.
I know
it's like saying, there's no room for Tom Brady in the Hall of Fame. Like, really, we're gonna say that. But I can remember, and I write about this in the book. There was a moment in maybe 2 weeks before the election, 10 days before the election in 20, I was working for the Lincoln Project. And I've been up for like 2 days making spots, you know how it goes. And I was looking at polling numbers, and I'd worked in all these states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona.
Yeah.
And, you could see through the noise that Trump was going to lose.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And I just remember going through saying, like, I can quit doing this now. This will be great. He's going to lose.
Right.
And had you said to me then, even as like, sort of soured on the Republican Party as I had become, would the Republican Party, if Trump lost by 7.5 million north of 300, accept it? I really would have laughed. It would have been like saying, so look, you're leaving the Super Bowl. Do you accept the score? It would have been like, what are you talking about, man? I mean, I could say the refs sucked. You could say, we should have won. You can't argue with the scoreboard. It is what it is. And yet that's what Republicans did, and with devastating consequences.
Yeah, you would have thought, as well, you hoped, but I think we all thought, oh, great, the Republicans now, Trump lost, they'll have a get out of Trump jail card, right?
Which they did.
Which they did, and say, all right, we did it with this guy, we're out. And then of course January 6th comes along, horrific, fateful day in American history, one of the worst, and then they all take to the Senate floor with their excoriating words, and Lindsey Graham yet again being another hissy fit. I'm done. I've had it. Enough's enough. As if that was 4 years later, 6 years later, whatever. Enough's enough. And then right away, right? It's fall in line. There's been a lot of exit ramps here.
A lot of exit ramps. McKay Coppins has written this wonderful book about Mitt Romney, which
I want to read it.
It's a beautiful book, fascinating book. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here because he talks about it in that book now. But when Mitt came out in 2016 and spoke the truth about Trump, I think it's fair to say that he was surprised that so few followed him. He thought, I have nothing to gain by this, obviously. I'm the former nominee of the party, so I'm not like a random guy walking through an airport who's, decides to give a speech on Trump.
No.
And yet none did. And when he went to the Senate, I think it's fair to say that he really thought that he could be part of a group they could put together 5 to 7 that would really be swing votes on key issues that could really steer the country. And to a certain degree, I mean, things like the infrastructure bill played a key role.
Mm-hmm.
But, I called him when I decided to do the Lincoln Project in the spring of 20.
Mm.
And I just said, look, I just want to let you know I'm going to do this. I hope, your Republican friends, don't give you a hard time about it and don't blame you. And he just laughed. He said, Stuart, I don't have any Republican friends. I'm the guy that, the guy in high school that no one wanted to sit with at lunch. That's me.
Yeah,
and when
I
you
saw
read McKay's book. That's a theme.
I read the Atlantic excerpt. I almost
Right.
wish I hadn't. It was so wonderful because I can't wait to dive into the book. And now I feel like I got part of it. But that it was like, here you have the 2012 Republican presidential nominee, a very honorable man that, and we're going to talk about in a second more, but that said he was eating alone every night.
Yeah.
Salmon sandwiches with ketchup. I'm not sure I would eat that. There's better things to depressively depressively munch on than that. But hey, whatever. But I thought, God, this is unbelievable. Like he just didn't. He'd watch Ted Lasso and take notes and read his briefing books. And
yeah, I've been to that place. It had
That
this kind of bachelor pad,
yeah,
sort of just divorced kind of.
just of right.
Lack,
He's such
lack
a
of
consummate
joy.
family man, and there he is alone. I know they don't all live there, but it's like, God, you'd think, how could Mitt Romney do that? But it's interesting, just to deviate for a second, and this actually is relational to it, because I think it relates to how information in our democracy has been parlayed and the misinformation and disinformation that's come out. In my previous life, because I was raised in a Democratic family,
Right.
but even when I was, and I worked for Bob Graham of Florida in the Senate, who's a deep family friend who I love and who was always a real moderate. I think I've always been a moderate, but I always loved as a kid, the sort of Reagan-esque commitment to communism and the Cold War. And, I used to tease people. I maybe was a Scoop Jackson Democrat. Well, people don't know that reference, but that kind of old school, anti-communist, middle of the road. I guess they eventually became neoconservatives. But the thing that's interesting to me is that Mitt Romney really was exceptionally prophetic on a lot of foreign policy things in 2012.
Yes.
And for my money, Obama's second term shat the bed on a lot of things. I voted for Barack, but I think a lot of stuff from Syria to the Iran deal to
Ukraine.
I don't like Ukraine, Russia, of course, condescended to Romney, called it Cold War thinking. And I remember thinking then, I just don't remember that not sitting right with me because, threats never go away. They just transform. But all of this is to say, I'm bringing this up for a reason, is that I do think that the Democrats did. It's not symmetrical, okay? But I think they did a disservice because in the world I came from, McCain was the devil, Romney was the devil, Dole was the devil. I mean, you probably remember this because but then the devil came in terms of Donald Trump.
I know.
And I take issue with that. I left the Democratic Party actually over the squad and all the left-wing anti-Semitism, which we're now seeing manifest. Not that I necessarily didn't become a Republican, but I'm a proud centrist and I hold a lot of hybrid positions. But I think stuff like that, again, we all have free speech, but I think the rhetoric that we use in terms of how we describe our opponents has fed a deeper polarization.
Yeah, I think about this a lot. It's fascinating just on the Russia thing. I was in all those briefings, and debate preps, and there wasn't anybody that was telling Mitt Romney, look, this is really going to help us in the polls if you come out and say this about Russia.
Right.
And he did it because he believed it.
Yeah,
and it's extraordinarily prescient. And I think the way in which he was attacked by the Democrats and also kind of by, New York Times, whatever, usual suspects. And Madeleine Albright has spoke out and said this was, basically apologized for it.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but also behind the scenes, Adam, what people didn't realize is there wasn't a lot of people in the Republican Party cheering Mitt on about that. They were quiet about it because, Mitt was the nominee. We're not going to go out and attack Mitt. But there were a lot of phone calls there saying, like, dude, what are you saying Russia? It ought to be China. It ought to be Iran. Russia, we're not worried about Russia. So it wasn't like Mitt was speaking really for any large segment of the political spectrum. It's just what he believed. And it turned out to, I think, to be more right than even he thought. I mean, if we had said, and in the 2016 election, covert Russian operation is going to help elect the next president of the United States, who, then is going to support Vladimir Putin's position that invasion of largest European country is a territorial dispute. The genocide is a territorial dispute. We shouldn't give weapons to that country. I mean, that is beyond the hope of. There's no way when they sat around in those rooms in Russia and decided to do this, that even after all night drinking, there's not enough vodka in Russia to make somebody think that was going to happen. And yet it did. And it's extraordinary. It's the most successful covert operation in history. It has to be. It'd be like, instead of getting Kim Philby to be a Soviet agent, you got like Winston Churchill to be a Soviet agent.
Right.
Anyway, I think one of the interesting moments now in our politics is I think the Democratic Party has a real opportunity to reclaim some of that
they do.
Strong on foreign policy.
Yep.
And if they do, it'll be transformational.
Right.
It's just fascinating. I mean, who is it that gets on a plane and goes to Taiwan? Nancy Pelosi.
I know.
Who is it that gets on a plane, flies to Warsaw, takes a 10-hour train, and gets, the first American president in a war zone that we didn't control in history, to stand by the Ukrainian people, a Democratic president, and putting together a coalition that really is saving the Western world. And one of the more really, really, really disturbing things about this moment is when you look at these nuts like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz. We've always had nuts, but these nuts could actually change history. Because if a Republican is elected president, unless maybe it's Nikki Haley or Chris Christie, and I don't think that's going to happen.
I would love it. I would love that.
I don't think it's going to happen. Both of them, I think, are tragic cases. Had they stayed with where they were in 2016, they would have been proven more right than they could have imagined.
I have your Nikki Haley essay.
It's just
the New York Times one, because you said I let me actually, while we're on it, because you read my mind, I'm just pulling it up here, Stuart. Nikki Haley threw it all away. I love this first paragraph. I remember the first time I saw Nikki Haley. It was in a high school gym before the 2012 South Carolina Republican presidential primary. Tim Scott, who was then a congressman, was holding a raucous town hall, and Ms. Haley was there to cheer him on. First woman to be governor of South Carolina, the first Indian American ever elected to statewide office there, the youngest governor in the country. Whatever that quote unquote thing is that talented politicians possess, Ms. Haley had it. People liked her, and more important, she seemed to like people. She talked with you, not to you, and she made routine conversations feel special and important. She seemed to have unlimited potential. Then she threw it all away.
Yeah. And she's on stage last night saying that, she thought Donald Trump was the right president for the time.
Let me ask you a question about this.
Yeah.
And I know, and again, my mission statement, I find it pretty much identical to yours and what LP does and stuff. And I'm with you, the never Trump. It's America or Trump. You can't have both. I'm not talking about Sidney Powell and these people that are now felons because they lied for Trump, and propagate all this bullshit, Rudy Giuliani and Eastman and these lunatics. But there are people. She was UN ambassador, there who may have served their time there that I think couldn't they get a little bit of forgiveness? I mean, Nikki Haley, if she were elected, is not going to overthrow the government. I mean, we have to be rational about it.
I think you can hold. It's a really, really interesting question and something I struggle with a lot. Yeah. I think, though, and human beings have the ability to hold two contradictory truths at the same time. Mm-hmm. So, one, I think it is extraordinarily disappointing, and I would say a violation of an oath of office to say that Donald Trump was a successful president, and to hold up your hand, as Nikki Haley did, to say that you would support Donald Trump if he's a nominee, even after being convicted for trying to overthrow the government of the United States. That should be disqualifying.
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah.
But hold that truth, and I'd a lot rather have Nikki Haley president than DeSantis.
Oh, yeah.
I'd a lot rather have Nikki Haley than, Vivek Ramaswamy. I'd a lot rather have him than Donald Trump.
Right.
So that's true. But, look, the sort of, not to go down a rabbit hole, but the sort of unspoken reality about the 24 election is, just think about it. Say Nikki Haley wins the primary. Mm-hmm. What's Donald Trump going to do? For the first time in his life, he's going to act like a normal politician and go,
no, he'll run
I'm going to do everything I can to elect Nikki Haley. Nikki will be a great president.
No,
that guy's going to go home. He's going to wake up every day and trying to do everything he can to stop Nikki Haley from being president.
Yep.
And that's the sort of suicide vest that the Republican Party put on and gave Donald Trump the button. And I've seen polls that 25 to 30% of Republicans will not support a Republican unless it's either Donald Trump or he supports that person. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's exaggerated. Maybe it's half that. Well, you can't get elected with that. There's no way. So, if God forbid I was advising any of these people, I would say wait 4 years.
Yeah.
Because one of two things is going to happen. Donald Trump is going to win or he's going to lose. Either way, unless like we really are in a post-constitutional world, he's not going to run again.
No.
So there will be an open seat. But that would mean you play it out. It means you'd have to go out and support Donald Trump. But they're going to support Donald Trump anyway.
Oh, yeah.
If he's the nominee. The test for me, I'm really fascinated to watch is, so you take like Chris Christie, Asa Hutchinson, who are running actively against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Both former clients of mine, by the way.
Yeah. Asa seems like a good guy. I mean, he has no chance.
Asa's a great guy. Asa is,
decent.
You could hate Asa's politics and disagree with him, but he would respect the hell out of you. And
I also think he approached the anti-trans hate in Arkansas with some compassion.
He's a kind human being.
Yeah.
He's not a mean man.
No, you can see that.
He's a good and decent person who is in really just a terrible position with where the party has gone. And it's just a tragedy that there's not a place for him. I never would have thought that Chris Christie, who I worked in both his campaigns, I love the guy.
He's great.
I never would have thought that he would endorse Donald Trump. Mm-mm. And I can remember so vividly, I was standing in an airport, and I saw him do it. And like tears came to my eyes. It was like watching a friend overdose. It was like, why? What a waste. What is it? What is it for you? And then in 2020, Trump tried to kill him with COVID and debate. I mean, he waited to January 6th to try to kill Pence.
I know.
It's like, I just, why?
It is so depressing.
But then, you look at it and you go, okay, you have to meet people where they are. And what he's out there saying now is important. And I'm glad he's saying it. But still, I'll tell you a quick little story here. My dad was an FBI agent in Manhattan when the war broke out. There's a guy from Mississippi who went to Ole Miss Law School. This is when all FBI agents had to be lawyers or accountants. They may still be, I don't know.
Yeah.
Having the time of his life, sort of chasing would-be German spies and going to the theater every night. And that order came down to round up Asian Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it for a day, and then he quit. And enlisted in the Navy. Spent 3 years fighting in the South Pacific, 28 island landings, and never regretted it. Lost a lot of friends, never regretted it. And, he didn't talk about the war much, like so many of those guys.
Yeah.
But he told me, one thing. He says, you can always say no. And that's the lesson I would say, to Christian, these people, you can always say no, man.
You learned that from your dad. You said no,
Yeah.
you didn't stick with the party. It's very interesting. We saw this in American politics, now more than ever seems to be one at the margins, because everything, we're gone, or the 49 state landslides of Ronald Reagan, or even the, 34 state wins of Bill Clinton or something. It's like another era, even Obama's big wins. We saw this polling, swing state polling over the weekend, which I talked about on my show the other night, and all but Wisconsin, and Trump is in favorable position. And I was going to run this theory by you. The reason and again, it's a year out. We know polls change. I was famously taught a day in politics is like a light year. So I'm careful not to draw any broad conclusions. But the only thing that scares me about this is that it's not incumbent Biden. We always see it as the incumbent and then the generic challenger, or someone who's running for the nomination who's never run, challenging that incumbent. People were mad at Reagan, they're mad at Clinton, they're mad at Obama, Bush. These guys all got reelected. This is a known quantity. They know who Trump is. He's already been president. And I don't think it's that, oh God, America wants to go fascist. I think that people are just feeling this troubled time that is not Joe Biden's fault, but the economy matters, and eggs and gas are, of course, inflation's come down, but prices haven't for most people, and they're feeling the pain. And I think that's a conundrum. That worries me. Trump up by 10 in Nevada. Again, I understand it's Europe, but
when I worked,
do you not put any stock in this?
When I worked in campaigns, when I would get asked, "Are you worried about?" I would stop them there and say, "Yes."
Okay.
Whatever you're about to say, I'm worried.
Okay.
about.
Okay. So I'm not being.
It's your job to worry with your campaigns, but they're deeply troubling numbers, particularly when you consider that Biden has to win the popular vote by probably 4 points to win the Electoral College.
Right.
So if you see Biden's behind 4, he's really behind 8.
Exactly.
So and he's really behind 14 points in Nevada, not 10 points.
10, right. And 45,000 votes roughly among 3 states.
Make the
Electoral
difference.
College last time would have had Trump in a second term.
So, this is why some people say we need a no labels candidate, which is a disaster.
That's
it will do nothing but ensure that Trump would win.
And that's a covert operation, isn't it? Some kind of pro-Trump operation.
I think that there are a lot of good people involved in no labels, but I think that there are some people who, at the very top, I think, have lost all faith in the Democratic Party and believe that they can blow up the Democratic Party either out of bitterness, or maybe even they think that in the long run that'd be better for the country. It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, whether or not, the person that sets off the bomb had good intentions or bad intentions, the bomb is a bomb. And it is a horrible anti-democratic thing that they pose as offering another choice. It would throw it into the House. The group of Americans who can't even pick a speaker. So they're going to pick a president. But my answer to that is I'd rather be an underdog in a campaign.
Yeah.
The worst thing to do is to be in a campaign with the league, because you wake up every day and you ask yourself, how much did we lose last night? Mm-hmm. So Americans like underdogs. And if you look at, I don't think Biden gets enough credit for his 20 campaign. So, he entered that race as a front runner, then got his ass kicked in the first primaries.
Mm-hmm.
And having been in similar situations, there is such hydraulic pressure to do something radical to change their candidacy or change the candidate. It usually never works, but somebody said, well, you got to do something different. And Biden and the Biden campaign, to their everlasting credit, said, we're going to win or lose with who Joe Biden is. And damn if they didn't win. Mm-hmm. And, this is a little bit in the weeds, but you're a political nerd. You'll appreciate it.
We love the weeds here. Tumbleweeds.
That's where the fun is. After Watergate, we passed public financing of presidential general elections.
Okay.
So starting in 1976, both candidates got the same amount of money if you voluntarily entered the system. You literally got the money from the Treasury when you walked off the stage accepting the nomination. There'd be someone there from the Treasury Department with a check. We were always like, can you wire this? And they go, no, we do checks. We only do checks.
Right.
It's like a tax refund. We're not going to wire you.
We're not going to.
That's so true. So it was around 80 million, 82 million. Yeah. That's the reason why we started moving conventions later and later, because you're going to get the same amount of money and you'd have a shorter amount of time to spend it. It had to be 60 days before the election.
Right.
So you cut to Obama. In 2008, Obama said he'd be in that system. Then he stepped out of that system. And they're pretty open about it. If you read David Plouffe's book, it's a very good book, The Audacity to Win. They just said, we knew we could raise so much money, we just did it.
Right.
And they did. So, but in that period, when you had federal funding, which leveled the playing field, right? Both candidates had the same amount of money. You had Jimmy Carter lost and Bush lost. Mm-hmm. So 2012 was the first time since 76 that both candidates were not in the federal funding system.
Right.
Because Obama
just a page.
Obama was not in the federal funding system in 2008. McCain stayed in the system. So Obama spent $735 million. McCain spent $85 million. Okay. So then it's fair to ask, when was the last time an incumbent president lost who was not in the federal funding system? And the answer to that's Herbert Hoover. And he had a bad year.
Right.
So you look at the Biden campaign, say what you will about Trump. They're the first to beat an incumbent president not in the federal funding system since Herbert Hoover. That's hard to do. So I have a lot of respect for the Biden campaign.
Oh, I do too.
They reinvented the convention. They did COVID. And I've sat in those rooms planning those conventions. To have 4 good nights or now 3 good nights is so damn hard. You can have 2, but probably one's going to suck, So I think, but my point is that if you're Biden in the Biden campaign and you've had a come from behind near-death experience, you will always believe you can do it again.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's a team that was down in the fourth quarter by 3 touchdowns and came back and won by 2. Mm-hmm. The next time you're behind by 3 touchdowns, you're not going to be sitting there thinking, we're screwed, we can't do this. And they're going to believe that they can win. Now, on the positive side, and I think this is a really fascinating question to ask, Adam. How many people out there voted for Biden in 20 who are going to vote for Trump in 24? I don't think a lot.
I don't think a lot. I guess what I would say, and you're much more expert at this than me, but I do love and can kind of feel the numbers. There's just no numerical room for error.
No. I mean,
so
this thing
it's not, this isn't 1996, whatever, 2000, will be a year, 2012. Obama, right, as you know, you ran the Romney, you guys won back North Carolina and Indiana, but Obama could still comfortably win re-election.
Yep.
This isn't, again, could North Carolina flip blue and Nevada go red and next year? Maybe. Well, but I mean, first of all, Wisconsin, or Michigan may be in play again in ways like they were in 2016, just on the matter of the economy, despite the fact that Trump's
it's a fascinating. So all polling is based on modeling.
Yeah.
And what we've one of the truisms that we grew up with, that when you were coming up in campaigns, younger voters don't vote in large numbers. Right. It's just a truism, It's like rain.
The kids will do it. No, they don't.
Rain makes wet streets. It's not wet streets make rain. Right. So that's proving to be wrong. And Trump's best group of voters were older voters, standard Republican, through Mitt Romney. Mm-hmm. And older people have a tendency to die at higher numbers than younger people. Mm-hmm. That's what the life insurance business is based on. And there are a lot of younger voters entering the system now. Mm-hmm. And Biden's best group by age in 20 was under 30.
Right.
Which is fascinating for a guy that old. And, in a way, this is all about race. Trump's coalition was 85% white.
Sure.
In a country that's 59-60% white. Mm-hmm. We're headed to majority country. But in a way, we already are. For those who are 16 years old and younger in America, majority are non-white. It's really fascinating. And odds look really, really good. They're going to be non-white when they turn 18. And what is that going to do to our electorate? Well, right. I mean, demographics isn't destiny. It is, though, if you don't change.
Well, there was some troubling data, though, in those polls, which is actually based on class, though it encompasses white, black, and brown. Non-white Latino men are drifting away, working class, very importantly, from the Democratic Party, which they see as, the elite party. And in the 22% of the black vote, I was trying to break this down to understand that. My black female friends who work in politics, that is black men drifting away to some extent. And with drifting away doesn't, people, again, don't understand polls. They said, oh my God, Trump's going to win the black vote. No, he's not going to win the black vote. But if Biden doesn't get 85% of the black vote or 90% or whatever it is, and Trump goes,
it's got to be north of 90. Plus, it's not just the percentage; it's the turnout.
Right.
It's the intensity level of it.
Right. That worries me. So what age are they? I don't know, but there is a class. To answer your question, I don't know. The non-white voter who is 18. Then you see all these people, which scares the shit out of me. And Biden is pro-Israel, and they're not, and so they're going to penalize him for that. And that worries me.
It's complicated.
I don't know, and in Michigan especially, that's a real threat if that holds.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to assume it's going to be a tight election. I think there is a scenario for Biden to win comfortably. I don't think there's a scenario for Trump to win comfortably.
I think that's right. Yeah.
And the question that I always ask myself in every campaign, every night, is, would I rather be us or them?
Yeah.
And as long as you can say, I'd rather be us, that's better. I'd rather be Biden in this race than Trump. Mm-hmm. Does that mean you can lose if you're Biden? Yeah, you bet your ass you can lose. But he's going to raise $2 billion.
Yep.
And, I think the Democratic Party is waking up to this. If I ran the Democratic Party, I would wake up every day trying to get in a culture war, not avoid a culture war.
I was just going to bring up 2022 and this past Tuesday, abortion. Yeah.
And it's wider than that. I mean, who won the Trump or Republican versus Colin Kaepernick and Nike war? Nike made $9 billion. Yeah. That's like, that's not bad. Trump managed to get in a fight with NASCAR over banning the Confederate flag. You're a Republican and you're in a culture fight with NASCAR?
Well, I mean,
NASCAR's still doing okay.
To your great dismay, to your the vigil that you've been holding, the party stands for nothing. I mean, you know what I mean? They're populists, they're crazy, they're liberal, they're conservative, they're anarchists, they're fascists, they're socialists. They don't have a governing philosophy.
They don't have a governing philosophy.
They're
No.
Trump, whatever Trump says of the day, now we're going to go that way. You know, how about, I've heard Rick Wilson use the term unlimited government conservatives. I mean, whoever thought that you would have a Republican governor, as you do in Ron DeSantis, who relishes weaponizing the state against the free market.
Against the happiness company.
Against happiness company specifically. But you've heard him say, and other Republicans, well, you know, yeah, we're limited government, but when it means combating this left-wing ideology, we're going to use the government. And here I am, you know, politically homeless, as I always say, because I am, missing, we don't have, I actually would look to, although they don't exist right now, the Republicans, the limited government party, the free market party. Get the hell out of my business. Get out of here. I mean, now you're gonna start being, you know, big government Republicans. I know
you're gonna attack. You're gonna go after Comcast because you don't like CNN. I mean, it's
such a morass.
And if you look at these red states where there's been abortion referendums, the way the pro-choice side has smartly framed the debate is not really about abortion, but about personal freedom.
That's right.
You're taking something away. Mm-hmm. And I personally think that a lot of the hysteria among Republicans about transgendered is because I think so many Republicans never really accepted the cultural change in same-sex marriage.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know, they just sort of shut up about it because it was such a loser. I mean, it is fascinating.
It is a loser.
In 2008, every presidential candidate, Republican and Democrat, opposed same-sex marriage.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's very hopeful sign. This goes to suddenly and gradually. So, you know, gradually then suddenly, change coming. You know, I mean, that's what happened with same-sex marriage. So I think that this is a way for them to relitigate same-sex marriage because with this kind of anger they have. But it's not, you know, how many people do you find somebody under 30 that even thinks about same-sex marriage being like wrong? I mean, very.
I mean, look, I you know, this used to be the reason I would almost, you know, I had always had my problems with the Democratic Party, but as a gay man, I said, how can I not vote for them? But, you know, yes, under 30, it's a non-issue. In my lifetime, I remember 2004, where it was like 30, maybe there've been 30 ballot initiatives trying to ban gay marriage in state constitutions or in state referenda. And then by, what was that, 11 years later, you know, Obergefell, you know, the gay rights movement made huge strides and very quickly in that period.
It was, I think, and I've said this before, I've probably written it, I think in Bush world, that was our darkest moment. Yeah. Shouldn't have done it. Don't think anybody inside the campaign believed it.
I don't either.
I don't think the president believed it.
I know Mary Cheney's gay, but Dick Cheney came out for gay marriage in 2000 in his debate with Lieberman.
You know, one of the
that was amazing. And you go back and watch it. He, by the way, I thought spoken like a true limited government conservative.
I don't even know if I wrote about this in the book. I wrote about the Bush campaign, but doing the Cheney debate preps in 2000.
Yeah.
We were prepared for Bernard Shaw to ask a question in which Cheney was going to come out in favor of same-sex marriage, which would have put him at odds with Bush. Mm-hmm. And, you know, before he accepted it, the invitation to be the VP candidate, you know, they talked about it and they agreed to be in different places on it. It wasn't like Bush said, you have to be where I am on this.
No. Right.
And if you go back and look at the debate, it's fascinating. He asked a question about then the Vermont referendum on this.
I remember that.
Yeah. And Cheney said he'd support it. He didn't follow up, would you support same-sex marriage? Right. And then he asked Lieberman about it. And it was just so clear. Lieberman had never thought about it. No. And Lieberman just sort of babbled. I mean, it was like you'd ask him about, like, what about the, you know, what's your deeply held feelings about the, you know, the law of the sea treaty?
Right.
But it was this close. Had Shaw asked just one follow-up, it would have been out there. So
for those who
I
listening,
find that very hopeful, though, as far as cultural change.
I do too. I mean, I still think, look, the energy now is so with pro-choice activists. The overturning of Roe, as horrific as I think it was, because I think Alito's opinion will go down as one of the most reactionary. Talk about poorly reasoned. I agree. A lot of Roe might have been poorly reasoned, but when a guy's writing about witchcraft, in a modern day opinion, because he's obviously, quite frankly, just a Catholic bigot, in my opinion, it just holds no water. The argument has nothing underneath it. But what I was going to say is that with all this energy on the pro-choice side, in many ways, okay, throw it back to the states. Well, it looks like state by state, let the people decide. That's what the right wing always says. It shouldn't be a court case. Well, now the people are deciding in deep red Montana that they want that personal freedom, which in a way, it's been horrific for women who've suffered because of this. But over time, this could be a bedrock constitutional principle forever.
Yeah. I mean, how long did it take Lindsey Graham to go from saying, this really should be decided by the states to calling for a national ban?
But also, what polls is Lindsey Graham? I mean, Lindsey Graham, we know he's went with the wind is his story. But what polls was he reading that was a good popular idea? There's no consensus. There's no groundswell for a national abortion ban at the federal. I mean, maybe there is in some Federalist Society meeting or something.
Well, man, I can tell you,
I'm just curious. Where's that? Was South Carolinian? I don't think they want that, do they? I don't know.
No, I think the logic was we can defend a 15-week limit better. Really, these states are going to go for more. Some of these states are. We'll take the pressure off. It was terribly, I think it's wrong on every level. But, as a Mississippian, when I grew up in Mississippi, it wasn't like abortion was common. But we all knew girls, high school, that had abortions because their family had the money to do what it took to get an abortion. And when you're banning abortion, you're really only banning abortion for poor women. Women of means, they will always be able to find abortion. And it's part of the whole incredible discrepancy in the way the law is applied.
And as it relates, to your book, all of these things, a multi-front war on democracy also means a multi-front war on the people who oppose the enemies of democracy. Excuse me, a multi-front war on democracy is a war against people who are fighting the autocrats. I want to use your quote here, which comes from the great book, by the way, How Democracies Die, the Stephen Levitsky, Daniel Ziblatt.
Great book. I go around passing that out like watchtowers.
And they also have a new book, Tyranny of the Minority. I know they have.
Great book.
Great book. So this book was their 2018 How Democracies Die. And you cite this in your book to describe the essence of the Republican Party's failure. Here's what they write. An essential test for democracies is not whether authoritarians emerge, but whether political leaders, and especially political parties, work to prevent them from gaining power in the first place by keeping them off mainstream party tickets, refusing to endorse or align with them, and when necessary, making common cause with rivals in support of Democratic candidates. Isolating popular extremists requires political courage. But when fear, opportunism, or miscalculation leads established parties to bring extremists into the mainstream, democracy is imperiled.
There you go.
There you go. Well, Stuart, as always, it's such a delight to have you. If you have not, if people are not aware of this, this is the book, The Conspiracy to End America. It's, you all know Stuart. You all know the Lincoln Project. Follow them, follow him. But what's your Twitter, Stuart? What's your?
Just Stuart P. Stevens on Twitter.
On Twitter, and read this book, because we are in a war for democracy. We're in a war against illiberalism, and we thank you and the Lincoln Project for fighting the good fight every day. And as always, thank you for being a guest on the show. Everyone listening to us, where to find us, wherever you get your podcasts, or at dirtymoderate.com. Our Substack is there and everything else. Stuart Stevens, thank you.
Thank you,
Oh.
Adam, and thank you for everything you're doing, brother.